Welcome back to The World Today. Threats to democracy and gun violence took center stage during the vice presidential debate with the Republican vice president candidate J.D. Vance and his Democratic counterpart Tim Walz on Tuesday. The debate is likely to be the final one, probably the only one before the 2024 November elections, potentially giving it some additional weight ahead of the polls. Each candidate pointed fingers when addressing the January 6th attack on the Capitol, with Walz at one point asking point blank if Vance believed former President Donald Trump had lost the 2020 election.
Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people.
You've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border.
But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed.
Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Well, powerful waves could be seen crashing onto coastal roads and trees uprooted from strong winds ahead of Typhoon Krathon's landfall in Kaohsiung this afternoon. Officials in the key port of the city of Kaohsiung, said to be the eye of the storm, have told people to stay home and avoid seas, rivers and mountains, warning of a repeat of 1977's Typhoon Thelma that killed 37 people and devastated the city of 2.7 million. This is all happening in Taiwan. Although the typhoon has weakened, the threats from a storm surge, strong winds and rain remain as it slowly makes its way towards Taiwan's coast. Typhoons often hit Taiwan's mountainous and sparsely populated east coast facing the Pacific, but Krathon is set to make landfall on its flat western plains. And at least 45 people have died, many others missing after migrant boats capsized off the coast of Djibouti. The International Organization for Migration said boats left Yemen with 310 people on board before sinking in the Red Sea off the East African nation on Tuesday. It's the latest boat disaster to hit the route, described as one of the busiest and most dangerous in the world, used by refugees and migrants from Africa. Thousands of African migrants have been sailing across the Red Sea toward the oil-rich Gulf each year, seeking to escape conflict, natural disasters, and poor economic prospects. There's horror and outrage in South Africa over a case of 2 black women who were allegedly shot and fed to pigs by a white farmer and 2 of his workers. 45-year-old Maria Magato and 34-year-old Lucia Ndlovu were allegedly looking for food on the farm near Polokwane in South Africa's northern Limpopo province in August when they were shot. Their bodies were then alleged to have been given to pigs in an apparent attempt to dispose of the evidence. The 3 men also faced charges of attempted murder for shooting at Miss Ndlovu's husband, who was with the women at the farm, as well as possession of an unlicensed firearm. Mabuto Nkube, who survived the ordeal on the evening of Saturday, August 17th, crawled away and called a doctor for help. A court is now to decide whether to grant bail to the farm owner, Zachariah Johannes Olivier, and his employees, Adrian and William, ahead of their murder trial. Well, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently described Africa's debt situation as unsustainable and a recipe for social unrest. Speaking at the China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Beijing, he called for deep reforms to the outdated, ineffective and unfair international financial system. Our South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa reports.
The discussion on Africa's staggering debt burdens continues to shape global discourse. Recent statistics reveals that 25 African countries are dedicating at least 10% of their revenues to debt servicing. These countries find themselves in a precarious position, prioritizing debt repayment over essential services like health and education. Meanwhile, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says debt is limiting Africa's growth and potential.
The world faces annual financing gap of some $4 trillion to achieve sustainable development. We call on better resourced countries to scale up their levels of support to developing economic countries.
Kenyan President William Ruto speaks about biased methodology in the financial sector.
Many countries in the global south are forced to choose between buying medicine and hospital equipment or paying their debt obligations, and between buying textbooks for school-going children or paying their debt obligations.
The pressing question is, how can Africa alleviate its debt burden? I recently spoke with Professor Denny Brandlow from the University of Pretoria, who recently published an article titled Easing Africa's Debt Burden, a fresh approach based on old ideas.
I mean, as you say, the burden of the debt is becoming overwhelming for many countries. The 23 countries in Africa that are spending more money on debts, servicing their debt, than they're spending on health or education. And so, the possibility of developing in that kind of situation is extremely difficult. And so we've been looking for a way that you could the countries could be given support to work their way out of that. And the idea, we had a two-part idea. One part, which is to create a mechanism, probably in the IMF, because they probably have the access to the resources to do this.
Professor Brandlow says as the international community grapples with these challenges, the G20's current approach under the common framework raises critical questions about the future development goals and financial sustainability for low-income countries. It is clear that addressing Africa's unsustainable debt situation is critical not only for economic stability but also for social cohesion. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samos, Channels Television News.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum has received the baton of power from Mexican indigenous and Afro-Mexican women during her inauguration as the country's first female president. She's also the first female president of a North American country. As part of the ceremony, Sheinbaum participated in ancient rituals meant to cleanse, purify, and invoke the protection of natural forces before being handed the symbolic baton, representing the political and spiritual connection between the government and indigenous people and Afro-Mexican communities. Thousands of supporters who gathered in downtown Zocalo Square looked on as the historical event unfolded. In her second speech as president, the 62-year-old scientist and former mayor of Mexico City offered 100 pledges, ranging from expanding public health care and education to building 1 million new homes and a pledge to serve the nation with honesty. Early in the morning, President Sheinbaum was officially sworn in before Congress, where she committed to advancing women's rights and maintaining Mexico as a secure destination for international investment. Finally on the program, it's Christmas. Well, not now for those of us in this part of the world, but in Venezuela at least. The holiday season officially began yesterday, October 1st in Caracas. Lights and festival and places were festively decorated. Had to get that out. Trees spread the spirit of Christmas. Local residents are seen posing for photographs as they enjoy the light displays. Wonder what they'll do on Christmas. They're also noting that the festival has started earlier. That's because President Nicolas Maduro announced last month the Christmas celebrations would start in October, 2 months ahead of the traditional season amid ongoing political crisis triggered by disputed presidential election results. It is not the first time the president will decree an early start to Christmas, a strategy his government has consistently employed in recent years. Well, still 2 months to Christmas officially. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ugani.